Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. On behalf of 500 Film Network, I got a chance to talk to Patton Oswalt about the craft of comedy and filmmaking. If you get a chance to see him March 18th, he's got a show at the Troy Savings Bank Music Hall at 7 p.m. Hope to see you there. First things first, are you excited to come to Troy, New York? Have you ever been here
Yeah,
before?
I've never been to Troy. I've been to Buffalo. I've been to Syracuse, but I've never been, and I've been to Albany. Have not yet been to Troy. So this will
Yeah,
be, and I'll come in a day early, so I'll get to like maybe look around a little bit.
yeah, there's some good food places around here.
Oh, good, good.
Yeah, yeah. Check out Nighthawks if you get a chance. It's one of my favorites. They also
Nighthawks. Good
Yeah,
to know.
they do a lot of wacky like during the week they do burgers and stuff, but like on the weekends they do like they have a different menu every weekend. So they like
Mm.
try new stuff. It's fantastic.
Oh, I can't wait.
Um,
Thanks, man.
what was it about Modoc that made you want to do this project as a co-creator of the show, and where did you start in adapting it?
Well, I've always been obsessed with the character of Modoc. I love the idea of a villain that is just as resentful of the other villains who he thinks are beneath him in terms of intellect and power. So, our main approach was to just go right back to the original source material by Jack Kirby, and like he was that way from the get go. And I really wanted to work with Jordan Blum. We had done a pilot before that didn't go. We've written comics together, so to get to build a whole world and play in the Marvel sandbox was too tempting not to turn down.
Yeah, and he wrote one of my favorite episodes of Community, the Meow Meow Beans episode.
Yeah, yeah, that was great.
So where did you guys start in like starting to craft this character? Because if anyone else had done it, it could have easily been just like another villain story. But you guys created a very, I feel, deeply flawed but empath like a character you could relate to. Like,
Well, we wanted that hubris of I want it all. Every other, supervillain has to sacrifice family and companionship in order to rule the world. I'll be the one who can do both. So that having that kind of uh, hubristic restriction on him, I think, led to some really good human comedy.
here's a comedy question for you.
Right.
We hear every day that writers should be writing every day, right?
Mhm.
So I'm curious to know what your process looks like when you sit down and write. Like, where do you start?
I don't really sit down and write. I mean, when I'm doing, you're talking about as a comedian.
Yeah, as a comedian or as a
I go
screenwriter?
on stage and work stuff on out on stage
Really?
as a
Yeah.
screenwriter. That's more me sitting down every day and trying to get a couple of pages out. But it depends on the project and what my schedule varies from day to day. So I don't unfortunately have a set schedule. So I've kind of embraced that chaos and so maybe I'm not the best one to give someone advice as to how to structure the day. You need to structure your day in any way that works for you.
Yeah. So how does that work for you in the sense that are you coming up with jokes and then you're like, "Oh, let me try something of this on stage and see what I can come up
Yeah, I just
with?"
come up with ideas and then I try them out on stage. That's where I do my
R-
writing.
Yeah, really. That's gives me anxiety. Uh
That's how it works for me.
that's
Again,
super cool though.
nothing should give you anxiety once you figure out what works for you. Whatever
Yeah.
works for you, that's what works for you. It doesn't mean it'll work for everyone else. Figure out what works for you. Some people like to sit down and write, and they should absolutely do that. It just doesn't never work for me.
Yeah. Do you record yourself on stage and then just kind of rework what you said, or do you just kind of
Not
know?
usually, no. I just kind of keep going, and the stuff that I remember means that that's the stuff that had impact.
Community questions for you.
Yay!
So this is from Michelle.
Uh-huh.
How do you stay authentic to your true self in your work?
I just try to be honest with wherever I am and not try to think so much about, well, I said this one thing when I was 23, so I've got to always be that way. Like, I'm not trying to create a set character. I'm trying to show people however I'm feeling in the moment, in the day, in the year. And that changes all the time. I mean, if you're actually living, it should change. People that brag about I've never changed, I've been the same. It's like, well, that's a sad way to live your life. You're supposed to make mistakes, own up to them, grow, evolve, move forward.
Yeah. Um, so this is a question from Patrick Smith. Uh, when building a new set, do you still go into it with the vigor and hunger of a new comic, winning over the crowd, or do you find comfort in knowing that you have an audience that will love you no matter what you do?
I never assume anything about my audience, and I don't really think of it as coming from hunger. If you come from hunger, that's need and desperation, and that's a turnoff. I'm always coming at it from, oh my God, I get to do comedy, and you guys are here, and I'm really happy that you're here. But I'm never going to go up assuming like they'll laugh at whatever I do because again, that's where growth stops. So I
Yeah.
just always come at it from excitement and eagerness.
Yeah. I think you answered this question already, but from Spencer Sherry, he asked, "What percentage of your bits are written up front, and what percentage accumulates as you play around with them while you do shows?"
Already answered it.
Already answered. He did have another question, but I didn't know how to word it. But he
Let's
wants to
see.
know how you came up with the KFC failure in a bowl joke.
Just looking at KFC and one, just things that I look at that I'm not looking to write a bit about KFC. Is I have to see something and it has to make me react, and that's how that thing made me react when I saw it. And so if that reaction happened, that's a thing that's real, and that's what I ran with.
I've got a question from Jamel Mosley. Do you think an artist is required to become more socially responsible as they become more famous?
I think an artist. I don't think anything that should ever be required of an artist, but I do think that you have to um, you have to engage in the world in whichever way you see engagement as true to you. Now that's going to
Mm,
be different for a lot of people, but if you just sort of freeze yourself in a certain moment of time, especially if you're trying to be a comedian, it's such a rejection of reality. And I think that that's ultimately dangerous. It can really stagnate your work and stop you growing.
got a question from Kevin Miner.
Mhm.
Um, are you are we ever going to see you as a live action Modoc?
I don't know. And if I'm ever going to be a live action Modoc, I'll be the last to know. They'll Marvel tells everyone at the last minute, so it's always a surprise.
It'd be
So if it
so
happens,
fun
I'll be
though.
as surprised as you.
Yeah, it was fun to see you come up as Pip the Troll. So I was like, that
That
was a
was
nice
nice.
surprise.
I'll take
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Um, I have a question from Victoria Diana.
Mhm.
Do you have any techniques for memorizing longer story bits or wordy bits that require you saying them as written?
None of my bits require me saying them as written. I'm relating things and telling a story. It'll be slightly different every time.
Mhm.
I try to think of it more as I'm talking to one person rather than I'm reciting scripture to an audience.
Yeah,
So if it changes a little bit every time, it depends on my mood, my energy level in the moment. I try to always keep it in the moment. That's what makes it captivating for an audience
yeah.
rather than, oh, he's just reciting this thing. You've seen people on stage. I've seen comedians on stage where it's like you're not even up there. They're not even engaged. They're just reciting a string of words that means nothing to them anymore. I just don't
Mhm.
ever want to be that way.
Is there any advice that you have for either comedians or filmmakers out there that you would give to yourself, or is there anything you've learned from your career that you would want to pass on?
Do the same thing I did when I was 19. Just start. If you just start, it will lead you where you need to go. But you have to start first. Got to stop talking about it. Got to stop asking questions about it. Got to stop theorizing about it. Just start. Even if it's terrible, just start. And everything else will follow. I promise.